Okay. When I was about 15 or 16 years old, I really got into, because I thought I was going to be a Baptist minister, the Bible. And we actually had groups from my high school would come over to the church, or we'd go to another church and study the Bible. And I never took the Bible literally, but there were some things in it I just couldn't understand. And one of them was Jesus saying to his disciples, "You will do the works that I do, and you will do these works greater than I have done them." And I said, that doesn't make any sense, because what I've been taught all my life is that Jesus, in the human nature, was perfect. That Jesus never made a mistake. That Jesus couldn't make a mistake. That Jesus was God incarnate and nobody else was. And so I said, how could he have said that? They must have misquoted him. You know, how in the world could he have said something like that? Well, thank goodness, it's taken about 50 years, but I see it now a different way. And what I want to do is just try to capture this morning your imagination of what I think Jesus' vision was. You see, Jesus said that heaven on earth, or the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, is at hand. Jesus said that it is like, and he gave numerous parallels where he said the kingdom of heaven is like. He said it is within you, by the way. And so as I started to understand that and see that, what I started to understand, I believe, that Jesus' message was that we can create a world that works for all. That we can come to understand that we can be one as we have been created to be. That we can love one another unconditionally. That we can actually create this world where we understand and feel our oneness, not just talk about it. And there's a difference. We can talk about oneness and say, what a great idea. We can talk about a world that works for all and say, what a great idea. But many times, we don't really experience it because we get trapped in what we call the human condition of what's going on in our lives. And yet, each and every one of us has the potential to do greater work than these. Now, in order to explain this, I want to go through some basics in unity. And please don't take this as theology. It is a way of describing what we believe and who we are. But it's not truly theology, it's just concept. And in unity, we think there is, and we teach that there is a metaphysical Trinity. Most of you probably were brought up with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So, unity says that there is, first of all, divine mind. And that the divine mind, you see, is the seat of truth. That divine mind is consciousness itself. We can't even explain it. No scientist can say, here it is. And yet it seems to be within the center of each of us. And we experience it because we have thoughts. And we have these thoughts in such a way that they are a fountain, if you would, of thoughts that flow in and through us. Now, there's a difference between a thought and thinking. Thinking is something that I have become in a habit of just thinking over and over and over again till I really believe it to be the truth, but I may not have examined it. A thought is something that comes to me and expands my thinking. And it creates what we call the second part of the Trinity, and it's all one, divine ideas. That divine mind is always creating divine ideas. Now, what we've taught in unity, mostly and focused on, is that you are that divine idea in the mind of God, in divine mind. That you are created in perfection, and that we are all on a journey of waking up to that perfection. We're waking up to what the truth is of who we are as beingness. And that's the perfect idea that we talk about in divine mind. Divine mind also triggers divine expression. That's your individualized spirit within you. And we all have it. You may not call it spirit, but somewhere deep inside of yourself, you know there's something going on, right? You know you're doing some thinking, and you don't even know where it comes from. And so that's consciousness. And we're trying to awaken to even a greater consciousness, which is the consciousness of a divine idea. And so you are perfect as you are. This morning, I want to use those three concepts to talk about creating a world that works for all. Creating a world that is spiritually awakened. And I believe that is happening quicker and quicker. And we are at the tip of the iceberg as far as the tools that are available to make that happen. As we understand this concept, what happens is we start to understand that the idea, which Buckminster Fuller was one of the first ones to use the phrase, a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out. And that to do that, there's this concept, if you would, of transformation. And transformation does not negate what has gone before it. Instead, what it does, it creates and fulfills what is to come. It fulfills the future. Creating a context of a world that works for everyone is not just another step forward in human history. It is the context out of which our history will begin to make sense. And so how do we take this idea of divine mind, divine idea, and divine expression and turn it into a path that leads us to creating this world of oneness? And some of you may have read The Phenomenon of Man by Teilhard de Chardin. And in that book, he talks about a path. He talks about, he was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist, and he talks about the idea of the Big Bang Theory. Now, this is in the 20s. He nearly got kicked out of the Catholic Church. They asked him to be quiet about it for a while, okay? Because that wasn't their teaching at the time. But he didn't, and so he eventually wrote a book which never published until after his death. But it was all about the idea that at the Big Bang, there was the element of love, is what he eventually called it. And that love was always pressing forward to reinvent itself, to create even a better way of being. And so we went from a molecule to complex molecules. We went from a one cell to multiple cells, trillions of cells, and eventually love produced you and me, the humankind. And it produced it because we are the vehicles through which divine expression takes place. I am because thou art. And thou art because I am. Isn't it interesting? Without you and me, there may not be any expression of God that we can recognize. So we are the vehicle through which this idea comes forth. And as that idea comes forth, we come to what we call the omega point. Now, the omega point is that place where there is an aha in the world, where we have grown in spiritual understanding to the point that we're willing to say, okay, I'm willing to live in the world with one another in peace and harmony. I'm willing to be in this world to support another person and the world itself. I'm willing to be in this world so that we can honor one another. I'm willing to let go of the notion that there has to be one religion, one way of thinking, one way of being, one way of living, but there can be many multiple facets of life going on, and that we honor each other even though we may not agree. But you know, there's one thing that just about every faith recognizes and works towards, and that is heaven on earth. Creating a world that works for all. Creating a world that is spiritually enlightened and spiritually awake. And so as we start to look at that, we start to see what he called the omega point. That's when we wake up to it, and we become aware of it, and we even experience it. And that's what I'm talking about this morning. We can experience this opportunity. And it's on its way. I believe it with all my heart. And so then Ken Wilber comes along, who's a great philosopher, and he writes a number of books. And in his books, he talks about a path for religion of tomorrow, a path for the religion of tomorrow. He says, and there are 4 things that religions have to do in order to cooperate with each other and to get to this point of sharing the world together in a loving and caring way, unconditionally. The first one is that we have to wake up. We have to be aware that we are spiritual beings having this spiritual experience. That we are in the human condition, yes, but that more than that, we have control over the human condition. You and I, individually and collectively. And so what he says is we wake up through meditation. I just want to make that point. That we wake up through meditation. Ken Wilber says there's no other way to do it. And so what I would suggest to you, if you don't meditate, if you fight meditation, and some folks do, if you say, I don't get anything from it, take 10 minutes a day and focus on just being in silence. Don't worry about if things and thoughts come up. And just imagine what it would be like to live in a world that works for all. And I'll give you some ideas on that in a few minutes. So we wake up. The second thing he says is we have to grow up. We have to grow in consciousness. We have to be aware of what our hang-ups are. We have to be aware of what our shadow side is, and we have to be willing to embrace that so we can grow up. So that we can become the children of God that we are meant to be, heirs to the kingdom, if you would. And then the next thing he says is clean up. Now, some people think about the environment right away, and that's part of it. But to clean up our act means to actually take the ideas that we get from meditation, to take this idea of growing up and awakening to all that is, and then begin to express it. And in expressing it, we clean up our act. And then the fourth thing he says is that we have to show up. And you know, that means, folks, we got to get out there and make some difference. And I'm not talking about forcing people to believe what I believe. I'm talking about just being compassionate and sharing with others and providing support for one another and others. That we accept everybody as they are in the moment. And we honor them because we see through the stuff and we behold the Christ in each of them. And as we show up, we can make a difference. And so there is this path, I call it, to the omega point, this path to creating a world that's spiritually awakened. Here are some of the things I believe that are necessary for us to do that we're going to have to embrace. The first thing that we have to embrace is the next target right up there, please. Oneness. There we go. I thought that's what it was. We have to embrace the idea of oneness. Now, again, all of us have probably, how many people in here have never thought of the idea of oneness? Isn't that interesting? Okay? How many people have experienced what they think is oneness? Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay? Because it's unique and different for each of us. And if we can experience that, we can become that. And so we are on this path to oneness. Again, oneness does not mean you think like I think, you act like I think you ought to act, you believe what I think you ought to believe. It means I honor you wherever you are. And I behold the divinity in you. That's what's really important. The second thing is we have to be missional in nature. And certainly transformation is part of that idea of being missional. It has to happen in a community. It has to happen in the world. At Unity of Richmond over the next year, we're going to see a little bit of change of how we can accomplish that with each individual. How you, no matter where you are, can grow in your awareness of yourself and actually be transformed. And then transformed again and again and again. You know, Jesus said you must be born again. He wasn't talking about being saved. He was talking about changing your mind. He was talking about seeing the world in a different way. He was talking about seeing yourself in a different way. And so if the quote would be right, it would be born again and again and again and again. Because that's how we transform our lives. That's how we make a difference in our lives. The other side is we got to get outside of ourselves. Now, I'm kind of talking about unity here, because most people in unity are very willing, especially leadership, to work with and to share ideas with people of all faiths. But to really work with somebody and form a partnership, it tends to be if you are new thought, if you think like I think. And I say today we've got to get away from that, and what we have to do is embrace everybody who has the same dream that we have, who has and can imagine a world that works for all. And in doing that, you see, we start to fulfill Jesus' statement that you can do these works and even greater works than I have done. And I don't care whether they are Baptist, whether they're Methodist, whether they're Hindu, whether they're Tao, no matter what their faith is, just about all of them say, we want to live in a world that works for all. And we have to embrace that, because by ourselves, we're not going to create that world. But the universe is helping us do that. Because what's happening is we are having ourselves surrounded with new inventions. One of the things I've been working on for about 3 years now, and for 2 years really solid, is the idea of what will the world look like in 2030. And when I embarked on that, I had no idea. I was amazed. I've talked about this a little bit, of what they were talking about in 2030. But most of it's driven by artificial intelligence. Most of it's driven by the idea that we can work with AI in order to make a difference. A lot of it's driven by the idea that we can communicate with each other within the moment. I mean, we used to have phones in homes. And it was kind of nice, because nobody bothered me unless I was at home. But today, people expect a phone call back, pretty immediately. And yet, if you're a certain age, you expect a text. And I know that, because I text my grandchildren. And now what's happening is that there are so many things being created that are uniquely going to bring us to this omega point, I think, as tools. And what they're doing is, one of the things about the omega point, you see, is there is a sphere. The earth is a sphere. And that means the more people, the more crowded. That means the more areas of communication, the more we're in touch with each other. And what that means is we start to think alike. We have that potential. What you and I think is contagious. And you don't have to tell anybody. They feel it. They experience it. And when people feel and experience a good idea, they want to be part of it. And so I think that's what's happening, that we have these tools to do that. But to use these tools, I think we have to use a power in unity that we call imagination. And the power of imagination is that power where we can take you and I like to be in meditation as I start to do that process, and start to understand and feel the thoughts and the ideas that are coming forth through me. As I do that, I then begin to understand that these thoughts and these ideas can be manifested and expressed, but first of all, I have to imagine them. So the power of imagination says that, one, I don't just see something, I feel it. I experience it. And yet it's still in the invisible realm. It's not totally in the visible realm. And so through the power of faith, I take imagination and bring it into and manifest it into the physical realm. And so we need to learn how to imagine, if you would, a world that works for all. One of the things I would like to do is to use this power of imagination in a time of meditation. And so we have a slide that's coming up, and it's saying, imagine a world. There it is. And I'd like you to just follow this as I read it. As we prepare ourselves for meditation, that's what we're really doing right now. So, imagine a world where every belly is full. Every head has a safe roof above it. Every hand is held. Every heart knows love. Imagine a world where there's only peace, compassion, inclusion, acceptance, and love. Imagine a world where health care and education are free to all who want or need it. Imagine a world where every being knows their innate worth, value, wholeness, and magnificence, that they have awakened to the truth of their beingness. And as you do that, gently close your eyes and just imagine what you heard. Somewhat like the song. There's only heaven. Right here, right now. There is cooperation. Right here, right now. There is peace because there is peace in the home. There's peace in the heart. There's peace in the community. Take a second and just imagine Richmond, Virginia, the greater metropolitan area, at peace, honoring one another. Feel that. And now let's just go into the silence for a minute or two and just imagine what comes to you from your heart. And in this power of imagination, I would like to ask you to affirm with me the following. Yes, my imagination is powerful. Say that, please. Yes, my imagination is powerful. Yes, I deserve to live in a world that is spiritually awakened. Say that. Yes, I am going to live in a world that is spiritually awakened. And yes, I am innately worthy. Yes, I am innately worthy, deserving, whole, and magnificent. And you are. And so, let's now come out of this time of meditation. Let's just be with one another in the present moment. And it's in the present moment that we start to understand maybe a little clearer what Jesus meant when he said that you can do the works that I've done and you can even do them greater. You can do greater works than these. Where you start to really understand and feel the potential that's coming. Where we can step into our future. And as we step into our future and start to understand that, today we can make decisions. Decisions that help us take advantage of all the tools that are here today and growing so that we live in the kind of world that we are worthy of and we deserve. I want to encourage each of you, not just for a day or two or a week or two, to put on your wall and remind yourself to daily, to take just 10 minutes, and just imagine a world where everybody is sharing love and peace. How would you feel in that world? And as you do that, a couple times a day, at least once a day, in time, what will happen is that our consciousness and our oneness will come together so that we will all of a sudden have the aha. We will experience the omega point, and we will find ourselves living the dream that Jesus talked about 2,000 years ago. We can do this. You can do this. Thank you.